Oh, let's see.
I think it's working.
Oh, there you go. Recording is started. Perfect. Okay. So then, okay, perfect. If you just send me a copy of it.
I don't even know where it goes. This is the first time we've ever recorded something.
I know. Does anyone know where it goes? Maybe we'll see an option. Oh, you know where it goes? Greg, it goes into the Teams, the folks in that invite. It'll show there. So we can grab it for you, Steph.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
I've never used that. I have no idea.
All right. Well, I think we're all here. Alex and Cassandra, and then Amber's not able to join us today, Stephanie, but we'll keep her updated on things.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Okay, so the goal of this meeting is basically to start off with the branding process. And the first thing that we need to know is kind of to understand what it is that you guys do. So I remember in the beginning, Craig, you had showed kind of like a PowerPoint that shows what you guys do and who your main customer is, with it being the DoD. So if we can kind of start there and kind of start diving in slowly as to, again, what you guys do.
Okay, you want me to turn on the PowerPoint?
Yeah, whatever you think would be best to kind of start dipping our toes and for me to start understanding what it is that you guys do.
Sorry, I wasn't prepared for that. I thought that you said the second meeting was the PowerPoint discussion. That's all right. Let me pull it up. Yeah, I mean, the charts say EO Solutions proprietary on them, but they're not really proprietary. It's just okay. So I think we have this, and we actually, this is an old version of this, like kind of description of the company. We have a better one now. Well, I guess what I would say is this is kind of the basis of that, but I think we modify it depending on the audience, right? Like I either use this kind of one version of this when we're talking to, say, people at UNLV or something like that, like students, right? And we have a different version if we're going to a particular customer, right? Where we maybe emphasize certain aspects of this a little bit more. But in general, and we're also not an LLC anymore. That's this is a very old thing. So in general, so we're a defense startup, right? A defense contracting startup. So our primary customer is the Department of Defense. We're not precluding other customers, but that right now that is true. And so in like generically speaking, there's kind of two kinds of defense contractors. There are defense contractors that so there's federal, there's DoD buildings all over the place in every state, all over, and there are contractors that supply like support to those specific locations, right? So like there's the Air Force Base there, Nellis, right? There's a bunch of military people out there, but there are also a bunch of like contractors, people that work for some company that supply some support, like they do budget or they do contract or they can clean the toilets or whatever. But I mean that they're basically companies that work for the Department of Defense, and they supply like basically people resources and skill sets. We are not that. The other category of defense contractor are companies that like have subject matter expertise in particular technology areas and build things for the Department of Defense, right? And so the things can be physical widgets, right? Like the F-35, right? Or a piece of the F-35. It could also be software, right? We do, because we do both of those things. We build software tools for the DoD, and we also build hardware. The hardware tools we build right now are in two broad technical areas. One is called like directed energy. And we specifically build high energy lasers in that area. And then the other broad area is called space domain awareness. And we build we do software for space domain awareness, and we do, ground-based sensors or telescopes. Right? A lot of things in space, we'd like to keep track of those things in space. They're far away, and we don't really know where they are all the time. And so it's a fairly, difficult and sophisticated problem just to like have, telescopes and other sensors on the ground to like look at the things in space and then keep track of where they are, and have software to tell sensors where to look, have software to predict where it's going to be tomorrow, that kind of thing.
I see. Okay.
And so we work in those two broad areas, I would say.
Okay.
And then if you take, I'm gonna make this picture big. This right here. So, oh geez. I just need to bring this to the front. So inside of the defense, right? Inside of the DoD, that like so you've probably heard the DoD's budget is enormous, right? It's outside of Social Security and other things, right? It's the biggest chunk of the federal budget, right? And the DoD, they like chop their budget up into a handful of bank accounts, right? And the bank accounts are tied to the type of thing they do with that money, which makes sense. This right here, so one of the major bank accounts is called Research, Development, Test, and Engineering, or RDT&E. We work in because of the tech, and so the normal like evolution of like new technology for the DoD, right, is someone has an idea, they come up with a potential invention, right? And they get funded with what's called basic research money. And the idea seems like it's working. And so they have another kind of money that like, funds that applied research. And then it builds all the way up till you have like invention turns into a thing, right? I thought of the F-35, and then the DoD funded it, in successively what they call maturing budget activity areas. BA stands for budget activity. Up till you get to like an operational demonstration of this. And then it transitions to a totally different pot of money called procurement. It's like, okay, we like the F-35, we're going to go buy a bunch of them. And we use a different pot of money to go pay for a bunch of F-35s. Where we work right now is in what we call emerging technologies. So it's things that are like kind of in this world. So like real close to being like an operational demo, like we're building prototypes of things, and they're real close, but they haven't quite broken into the DoD has said, yes, that's the answer. We're going to go buy 1,000 of those things. And so we're working in this world over here and trying to get our stuff pushed into that, procurement, major program. We're going to buy many of these things, for the DoD.
That makes sense. Okay. Totally makes sense.
And so like I bring that up only to say that like I think from, we're not going to have budget activities on our website, obviously. But if so, I said there's two broad categories, right? There's defense companies that like just supply people resources to support, on-site defense, efforts. And then there are companies that work on the other side of the fence and build widgets and try to sell those widgets to people on the inside, right? If you take the widget builders, you can chop them generally up into a handful of categories too. There's people that tend to be on this side of this, like, spectrum. So they're like trying to like that. They're building more mature technologies and they're trying to jump into like get this into a major program. And there's companies that kind of sit over here and just, these are the, like if you watch Big Bang Theory, right? Like Sheldon is this guy over here, and Howard is this guy over here, right? Like,
Okay. That
Don't get
makes
me wrong, we got some Sheldons on the team here, don't, you know, so that, like, that, those people exist, right?
but what we endeavor to as a company is be on this more mature side of prototyping technology. We're not really doing these like basic research, you know, this is like, you know, particle physics, or, you know, like really like universities, academics, like, you know, this is an idea that could be something someday. And one of the reasons for that is the amount of money that they spend here is much smaller than the amount of money they spend over here. Right? Because this is, you know, if you think about, like, we're trying to solve a problem, we're going to fund 1,000 ideas, right, at a little amount of money and see what bubbles up, like what makes it through all these rungs. And then by the time we get to here, we've kind of picked the solution, and now we're, you know, crossing the T's, dotting the I's, and making it work. But it costs a lot more money because this is a much bigger, you know, this is the, you know, this is a research paper on the idea of a laser to shoot down like an unmanned aerial vehicle. This is an actual laser to shoot down, right?
right. They can actually probably do it, right? Okay.
Well, and what I was getting at there was just the money, right? Paying someone to write a paper on that idea and paying someone to build that actual thing are two, you know, far different classes of dollars, right? And so we exist in this place where they are emerging technologies, and that's something we will, that's a phrase that we will have. I will create a little I might create like a little jargon card for you, because there's a few, there's some like very specific jargon that is unique to the Pentagon and the DoD that we want inside of our website. Emerging technologies is one of them, right? Directed energy, space domain awareness, you know, technology transition, like how I'll work with you on the wordsmithing of things.
Okay.
But we are building like laser systems and space domain awareness, like sensor systems and software that are kind of existing in this like higher level of maturity, larger dollar space to fund, and are really one of the, you know, handful, you know, by the time you get to here, there's like a couple candidates to solve the ultimate problem that's trying to be solved, right? We're trying to be one of those candidates and push our stuff into this like major, you know, major program, major procurement activity. And so we primarily live over here doing that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Let's see here. Some context for why this makes sense that will kind of be woven into that is some words here on it. So every, you know, not every year, but every few years, I should make this bigger so it's easier to see, probably. Sorry, how's that? You know, so the White House, right, the president creates a what's called the national security strategy. And the national security strategy is this very high level document that informs not just the Department of Defense, but like I would say the national security apparatus in the country, right? So it informs the Department of Energy, it informs, you know, Department of Justice, you know, maybe, I don't know if it informs Health and Human Services, but basically, like, it informs how the president's cabinet is going to behave, what their priorities are,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
So, you know, in September 11th, 2011, right, or 2001, I mean, the national security strategy became the global war on terror, right?
Right.
Buildings got bombed in New York, right? And so the Department of Defense creates what's called the National Defense Strategy, which is informed by the National Security Strategy. The Department of Energy probably has some National Department of Energy strategy too, right? So that high level document informs that. So when our national defense strategy was being informed by the global war on terror, the reality was, if you think about like the way the DoD functions, right, is they are going to, you know, they are preparing to fight a war with someone, right? If the war you're preparing to fight is with Al Qaeda and ISIS and disparate terrorist cells right across the world, the type of things that you spend your money on as the Department of Defense is going to be specific to that problem. So we weren't really worried about space domain awareness, right? Because Al Qaeda doesn't have satellites in space, right?
Right.
So that wasn't an area where they needed to invest their money. Similarly with like lasers, right? Kind of didn't have like, thousands of autonomous drones that could fly around and bomb things. They had like onesie, twosies, so they spent their money on like, I don't know, I don't know how old you are, but if you remember, at the time, right? So, September 11th, right? And then all of a sudden we go into Iraq, we go to Afghanistan, and then only thing on the news you could see was soldiers dying from IEDs, right? Roadside bombs, these improvised explosives. And so
Yeah.
that was just all over the news. America's sons and daughters are dying from IEDs, right? So a significant fraction of the DoD's money for developing new things went into building a truck that would survive an IED because it was the problem.
Makes sense.
Right. And so that's where they spent most of their money. And so for 20 years, pretty much the investment, if I go back to, if you look at like this chart, where they spent their 6.1, 6.2, 6.3, 6.4, 6.5, where they spent those dollars was really more focused on solving those kinds of problems, not these, what I'm calling emerging technology problems, right? In
Okay.
2018, that changed, right? So the national defense strategy, the national security strategy, national defense strategy changed to be near peer competition, right? So now it's like the threat we are concerning ourselves with now is China and Russia. Well, China and Russia are state actors, like they're strategic actors. They invest in new technologies. They invest in space domain awareness and lasers to shoot down. So, as a result, we will too. That whole backstory is irrelevant for the website, but I think what I would give you the editorial version here. But the reason we started the company and the reason we're working on the things that we're working on is because this major shift in how, like, as a federal government, our department, down to the Department of Defense, how they now are organizing themselves to address the new direction from the leadership of the country, right? So when the president says we don't care about IED, well, it's not that they don't care, but when we care a lot more about building up emerging technologies to address the Chinese threat in space or the Russian threat with drones or whatever that is. Then they started investing their dollars, and that was really the impetus of the motivation for starting the company in the first place, is to be able to address that, right?
Got it.
I told you that, I put defense contractors into two categories for you that were like people that are on-site support and people that build widgets. You can cut it up a different way, right? Into big and little, right? You can have, there are giant defense contractors like a Lockheed Martin or a Boeing or a, Raytheon who, they who do big things. And then there are little defense contractors like us, right? And there, and there really is a pretty big stratification. There's a bunch of little companies that are like less than 100 people kind of thing. And then there's a handful of like, multi-billion-dollar companies that do most of the defense work.
Right.
The challenge for a big company, right, is big companies make themselves in the image of the federal government, right? So if the federal government if the DoD for 20 years isn't really building anything new from a technology perspective, then a big company will organize themselves in that way too, right? So for 20 years, we didn't make any new technology. We upgraded existing technology. So we got a tank. Okay, let's make the tank a little bit better. We got a radar. Let's make the radar a little bit better, right? And so big companies right now today are organized to do that kind of thing. They're not organized to do something that we've never done before, like a laser to shoot down a UAV or a transportable telescope that we can like go plop down and take some data and then move and take some data. They're not set up to do that. Conversely, little companies, so what I would say is, the big companies have all of those pieces. They got all the Sheldons, they got all the Howards, they got all the infrastructure. They know how to do all the things, but they're not all organized in one chain of command necessarily to pull a team together to do that effectively, right? Because that's not how they've operated. Conversely, like a little company, I don't have a little company org chart here. A little company like ours, right, is typically what we have is like great technical depth. So we're like mostly, typically we're mostly Sheldons. So we know a whole bunch about the technology, but we don't have a perspective on that bigger picture. We don't have, if you go back to this, most little companies typically work down in this part of this world, right? In the idea phase, lower dollar amount, not making anything real. And what the DoD is now asking is for these companies to have new technology, which is coming from this side of this little curve, but put it over here and get it ready to transition. And the experience we have, my experience, from the past working, in the government is we kind of understand how to operate in this world over here, but we still have the technical depth to answer questions on this side, right? Like I said, we got the Sheldons and the Howards, right? So we can build real things, but informed by strong technical depth and for something for a new technology, right? For something that's truly new, you need to have all of those pieces at once, right? And so we've picked areas of technology where we're doing telescopes for telescope sensors and these lasers. Our company's not going to build an F-35, right? An F-35 needs like a mile-long production facility that Lockheed Martin has, where titanium goes in one side and F-35 rolls out the other side. We're just not those people, right? I mean, that truly does require a multi-billion-dollar kind of global company. But to build the things we're talking about, building these emerging technologies, at the numbers that they're talking about, we do have the ability to do that. And if we can have technical depth and understanding of how to make it work right, and an idea of what right looks like once it gets out of our lab and into a soldier's hands, then we could be pretty powerful. And so I tried to encapsulate that with this amazing little three-legged stool. Forget the congressional support piece. That's not something that will go on the website, but that's something we're pretty good at too. But so the way that the DoD functions, right, is they've got three major stakeholders. They've got the nerds, they've got the people that know the new technology. They've got the user, right? And this is the user, that's the warfighter, that is the person responsible for actually fighting the war. They know what the problem is, right?
Right.
So like, if I go back to this picture, so the president says, global war on terror is not the thing now. China's the problem. And so then some 4-star general or some admiral that's, right now it's an admiral that's in charge of, fighting the war in Indo-PACOM, which is the area that the world that we chopped up that China's part of. They go do some modeling and simulation, right? We get some intelligence from China. We find out China's got 110-foot bullets. And then we go look and we realize we've only got 108-foot bullets. So when we run the modeling and simulation, every time we have a battle, they win because they can shoot us 2 feet, they're 2 feet farther away from us that they can kill us before we can get to them, right? And so the warfighter, then that they say, hey, I need a solution to the 110-foot bullet problem, right? I don't care if it's a 111-foot bullet. I don't care if it's an orange launcher. I don't care if it's a laser, right? I just need something that when I do my model, when we go and look at how we might engage in a conflict, that we know that we will win, right? And so what they do is they create, the term is called requirements, right? They create requirements and they generally flow those requirements down to these S&T people, and I have PEO, these are acquisition people. And what happens is like, okay, 110-foot bullet problem. They go and talk to the PEO. The PEO is called Program Executive Office. These are the people that buy the F-35, right? There's a whole section of the DoD that's just set up to go buy widgets to go field for the warfighter. And they go to the PEO and like, hey, you got any 111-foot bullets? And the PEO goes, no, we don't. And I go, oh crap. So then the PEO goes, hey, S&T people, you got any 111-foot bullets? And the S&T people go, I don't know, let me go ask Sheldon. And Sheldon's like, yeah, I got a 111-foot bullet idea right here, but here are the 15 things wrong with it, why it won't work. And so then they spend money to make the 111-foot bullet thing work, and then they transition it over to the PEO, and then they, and then it's given to the warfighter. In this picture, these are these, this is the S&T people over here, like the left side, and this is the PEO people over here, and then that jump into the procurement acquisition thing that I was saying, those procurement dollars, that other bucket of money. And so the flow is these guys identify the problem, they figure out if they can solve the problem with current capability. They can't. They go to the technology people for new things. And what we're trying to be is the bridge between these people and get our stuff put into their world, right? And so what we're trying to be as a company, right, is because I guess it's just another observation, also not something that necessarily would go into the website, but but what is the reality is, if you spend 20 years where, if you spend 20 years not ever going to ask about lasers or space domain awareness things from the Sheldons, right? That's an entire generation, right? I mean, like, that's someone's almost entire career. So while these two groups were off fighting the global war on terror, these guys were out on an island picking their nose and doing whatever the hell they wanted to. And so we have a whole generation of these people that don't have no idea what they're doing, right? Have no idea how to make their thing real to these two communities. And then these two communities also, every time they would go look, they're like, you're a bunch of Sheldons, you're not doing anything real. We don't like you, and we don't like anything you're doing because you're just playing around in a sandbox. And so what we are trying to be is that bridge to say, hey, no, I understand, warfighter, the problem you're trying to solve, and I understand, acquisition people, the rule set that you have to buy things under, and we are going to design our thing because we're legitimately experts to meet both of your needs at the same time. So I think it's very hard to communicate that, because I'll be honest with you, even if you went to talk to someone most people in the DoD, I don't feel like they could articulate this picture to you that well. But this is how the DoD functions. It doesn't matter whether the Army, Air Force, Space Force, Navy, Marines. This is how they function, right? And they may call them a little bit different names or whatever. And this is how we intend to behave, right? And so we'll use a term like mission focused team is the thing. Rapidly, like these are buzzwords that we'll use. Actually, this is wrong. Right here. I will not send you these charts because that's actually not a correct statement. I'll clean these up, and we can talk through them more than once, because I know this is probably much different than anything you've ever done, but I can kind of continue to talk through it, right? And so this is kind of what we think is. The bottom part is not important for the website, obviously, too. But we're not putting anything, nothing related to congressional anything on the website at all. But that is true. So, and this is, I tried to articulate to you, before, these things, right? So this is that warfighter, that user, right? What do they want, and what performance is acceptable, right? So like I said, 111-foot bullet. Well, maybe there's maybe 108.5-foot bullets fine, right, and does the job. There's always a way around that. Building things. The biggest issue right now, and affordability. The two themes throughout this, I think, when we talk about the products and the work, is going to be reliability and performance, because this is the canonical issue with a nascent technology, is that you don't have, we're not giving them iPhones where there's this huge industrial base like making all the things that go into an iPhone, and we're just like modifying it. This is like there's very small industrial base because it's a new emerging technology, right? I mean, so as a result, the things we build tend to be very expensive, because we're going to Joe's laser shop, and Joe builds 2 lasers a year, and and so Joe's got to make his money on those 2 lasers, right? So you're going to pay a lot of money for them, and because the volume is just not there. And so our technical expertise allows us to design things that can have the performance required. It does the thing we need it to do, but also allows us to ensure that it is cost effective and reliable. And then the acquisition piece. So there's just when you get into like a major acquisition program, these things are there's oversight provided by by the Congress, by the Senate, right? I mean, there's a bunch of statutory obligations, right? I mean, you can't, the DoD doesn't just willy-nilly go out and buy whatever they want, right? I mean, there's a rule set under which they have to purchase things. And so having expertise in this as well is actually a pretty critical part of just getting something, transitioned out of the research realm and into the, we're going to buy a bunch of them procurement realm. And industry, us as a small company. And so, to kind of relay it back to, so big companies can do all of these things, right? They have all of these pieces, they have expertise in all of these things. Typically, little companies only have expertise in this one bullet, technical expertise. And typically, they also don't care about producibility or affordability either. The only thing they care about is making their thing look, work, right? And so what we are endeavoring to be is a little company that organizes itself in a way to actually have these areas of expertise in the specific domains of technology that we're working in, so we're not like, a big company, like Lockheed Martin does lasers and they actually do SDA and they do F-35s and they do missiles and they do radars and they do tanks, they do a bazillion different things, right? And it's unreasonable for us to do all those things. It is reasonable for us to do those things in like 2 areas, right? We're going to do specifically lasers to shoot down UAVs and specifically ground-based telescopes to, track things in space, right? We can build teams that have this level of expertise in those things. And so it's, back to, I mean, I use the term high-end. I don't like the term boutique. I don't think the term bespoke is good, right? But I do think it's kind of like that, right? I mean, what we're doing is we understand the process it takes to get from like good idea to prototype kind of demonstration into like a major effort, and we want to apply that expertise, but just in these specific areas.
So would you say it's fair to say that you're trying to position yourself as a bigger company by saying we know all of these things like the bigger company, right?
Yeah,
But,
I mean, bigger than we are for sure. I mean, I guess the argument I would make is that I think specialized, I think a special, like we don't want to be 3,000 people in my mind, right? I mean, right. I don't know. I mean, we want to be the appropriate size and be specialized in working in these specific areas, and so the number of people it takes to be, to remain specialized in these specific areas and do the work, right? That's kind of where we want to be. And
right.
And what I would say too is, as a company, we've picked space domain awareness and high energy lasers as our, that's where we're starting. That doesn't mean that's where we end. I mean, we can, this model applies to any emerging technology in my mind, right? It's just, you got to, you got to scope the problem in a way that is manageable or palatable, as to grow as a small company. We picked these 2 areas because frankly we have domain expertise in these 2 areas, so it makes sense. But the way we would grow, and we're small, we're brand new, so we're still growing. But in my mind, the way we would grow significantly is we would become involved in another emerging technology area that we applied the same kind of methodology to, and grow in that way.
So you mentioned,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, you mentioned the other bigger companies. Do they also do this whole process from the beginning, or do they just work on the procurement side and pumping out the widgets?
What I would say is, I don't have a great, I tried to articulate, like the org chart here kind of tries to speak to that. At a big company, you typically have, there's a piece of the big company that has, like, the bunch of Sheldons, the S&T technology development, that kind of live over in this side of the world, right? And then you've got like engineering people and so these would be like laser, space domain awareness, new technology people. But if you'll notice, there's not really a line anywhere for them because they
Right.
truly are out on an island. Like they're not part of any major program. What I was trying to represent with this is like a major effort, like upgrade the radar. It's something totally different than this, but this is like a major line of business. Like Lockheed Martin's, has four major lines of business or four business areas, right? They've got missiles and fire control. They make missiles. They've got aeronautics. They make airplanes, right? They've got space. They make satellites. And so, they've got the other one's called RMS. They mostly make helicopters, I think, but the analogy a little bit breaks down. but they're not like bigger companies how they're not organized correctly is they don't have, and it doesn't make sense for them because right now the business isn't big enough for them to do this. But what they don't have is like one like leadership chain that goes from like high level in the company down to scientist that encompasses all of these pieces. What they have is like they've got a piece, they've got a pocket of technical expertise in an area, and they've got a pocket of warfighter or user expertise in a different area, right? And when they try to do these emerging technology programs, they'll like matrix them, they'll try to pull these people in, but ultimately they're not all reporting to the same boss. And so because they're not reporting to the same boss, they're not particularly efficient, right? Because, this person with acquisition experience reports up a different chain of command and yeah, you got a problem, but so do these other 15 programs and you're just not, super high on my priority list. And that's where this mission focused team construct comes in, right? Is if we're going to go build a laser to shoot down UAVs for the Army, then on the same team, we'll have the people making the technology, we'll have the people that understand the user in the Army that would ultimately use that, and this office in the Army that would ultimately acquire many of them, all on the same team, and all shaping how we run through the development of this effort from the beginning.
Got it. Plus, also, if you think about it, like if a big company is already making money off satellites that they're building, why would they also care so much about like the emerging technologies in that sense, right?
Yeah, that's actually. I mean, I agree 100%. Like for example, at Lockheed Martin, right? They make a lot of missiles to shoot down drones, right? If you make a laser to shoot down a drone, then you're kind of competing with yourself, right? I mean, you're not necessarily,
yeah, that's true.
You're not necessarily incentivized. You're not necessarily incentivized to bring emerging technology out because it takes a revenue stream away from something that you're already making. And so the reality is a lot of those companies aren't actually incentivized to do this in the first place. That's where I wouldn't want to put that on the website. It's more of a cynical take, but it is 100%. It is 100% accurate.
Okay, that makes sense. And then also, from what I'm understanding, and again, correct me if I'm getting this wrong. Like I'm thinking of like the Sheldons out there. I see them kind of like creatives, right? They're kind of over there like playing with different things, and hey, what happens if I do this and this? But there is no connection or no, hey, we need this, like you're saying. There's nothing from the warfighter saying this is the problem. And they're not getting that information. They're just like, I wonder what happens if I do this.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. They're totally disassociated from like how the technology that they are developing links to the problem they're actually trying to solve, right? Which is a huge, huge issue, right? I mean, that, like if you go talk to the Sheldons, like if you go, like I sit in Albuquerque, the Air Force has a research lab here, and I used to work there. I worked there for 10 years. And when I was there, right, the reason I know this is because it was my lived experience. When I was there, I was building lasers. I didn't really know why. I didn't know what problem I was solving, but I knew that like we were building lasers. And and it was the link but from these people, I was one of these people, right? And the link between these people and this group just wasn't there. There wasn't someone coming and saying, we need you to build this for this reason, which would have shaped how I was doing it, right?
Right. Yeah.
I was just kind of left to my own devices. I was like, oh, I'm building this laser. Well, what should we do? Let's make it more powerful, right?
Right. Like let's make it green for no reason.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, let's make it green. Why? I don't know. It seems cool. It seems like a cool science problem to solve, right?
And that's exactly right. And that is like fundamentally the issue with, back on the like the little company discussion, right? Like what little companies are really bad at doing right now in general is linking the thing they're developing to the actual problem, right? So little company will go make a widget and then they'll run around to everyone and be like, hey, I got this super cool widget. You want to buy this widget? And everyone's like, well, no, what does it do? Right. And usually the issue is that the widget's way too expensive, but it also is like way too expensive and also doesn't really solve a problem that they actually have.
Okay, that makes sense. So also, like, it sounds like you're also very targeted on the fact that you guys are a small business because you can do this model and bring in all of these different legs in order to bridge them together, knowing
Yeah.
each of these parts.
What we can do in my mind is, like rapid prototyping is somewhere in here. Yeah, rapid innovation, rapid prototyping. In my mind, what we can do is like back to this picture is we can go from here to here very, very quickly and we can do it efficiently and get a product at the end that, is tied to an actual user warfighter requirement, can actually be built, we can actually afford it, all of the things that are required to make this a real product versus, like, bigger companies can 100% do that too, but they're just really inefficient because they're not organized well to do that, like I said. And littler companies don't typically do it because they're not typically informed by, they'll get all the way over to here on this side where they've built some demonstrator and we spent a lot of money. And then we realized like, well, yeah, except for we made this design decision and, it's not really answering the mail, on solving the actual problem. Oh, and by the way, it costs, 6 times as much as our existing solution that we don't like that much, but, our existing solution costs, $10 million and your thing costs $60 million. We can afford it. So, it just doesn't make sense. And so what we're really focused on, like I said, is at the very beginning, the designing and building things that are addressing the needs, early on, and then iterating on that very rapidly. And then, so the barrier to entry from a cost perspective is really low. Low cost is across the DoD right now. One of the impacts, right? These little data points are from this actually from the National Defense Strategy, but this, so I didn't invent these words, right? I'm just like, I worked most of my career for the military, and what I found when you work for the military is the super boss comes out and says some things, right? If you just say your thing, if you say whatever you're doing in those words, they like it. And so
right, it's like you're talking the talk.
Yeah, exactly. It's a pretty straightforward thing, right? They're like, we need to organize for innovation. I'm like, guess what? We're organized for innovation. We need to stress affordability. Guess what? I'm building low cost lasers.
Yeah.
Okay. But the challenge of doing these things with bigger companies ends up in any of these companies ends up being the price, right? Mm-hmm. Building new things quickly is expensive, and the DoD, while they have a ginormous budget, they do not have an infinite budget, and so you're constantly, there's some, like with the laser, there's an existing solution to shoot down drones. It's not their favorite solution, but you're essentially competing with that existing solution. Right. Same thing for SDA. There's existing solutions to do space domain awareness. It's not their favorite solution, but we're ultimately competing with it. And the barrier to entry for the new technology, like number one is always money, right? And then number two, it becomes like reliability. So you built this thing, okay, you made it affordable, but we get it out there and it breaks constantly because it's brand new and you haven't really put it through its paces. And so those, affordability and reliability are some important points we address in our design.
Got it. And it sounds also like, again, from a positioning standpoint, as far as branding goes, that you want to focus more on the problem, like the warfighter, that you look at that first, and that's the starting point as to everything that you do.
That's exactly right.
It's going to work, is it going to be affordable, but it's going to solve a solution that you actually need on the field.
That's exactly right. That's exactly
this whole process, I mean, I don't have that chart in there, but this whole process starts with just, it's the, like I said, the 4-star general goes and runs the modeling and simulation on, fighting the fictitious war in the future. And they're like, they got 111-foot bullets and we only got 108-foot bullets. What do we do, right? And that defines the problem, right? So what are we doing to solve that problem, right? And aligning ourselves with that, right? And it's good for the DoD and it's also good for us because then we don't spend a lot of time and money, inventing things that no one wants.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Because what happens, in this construct, in this picture, it's just, there's so many layers of leadership inside of the, there's so many layers of leadership inside of the DoD. There's 15 people between the 4-star general that define the problem and the person that you're interacting with on this effort. And that person typically isn't that well informed, right? So like they have the idea of what they want to do. And so, as your government customer. And so a lot of it is shaping, that's a separate discussion, but a lot of it is shaping, getting them to understand, no, the problem's over here. We need to solve this problem and we need to be on the path to doing that. And so, we're in a time in the DoD where, because of this shift, right? Like I said, we have entire generations of people that have been trained to operate and behave differently than what they're being asked to do now. And I saw that when I was on the government side, and I think those words actually could make it into there, right? Is like, I don't know if we get so on the nose to bring this up. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. But I think, at a high level, what I'm saying is like we're a small company and that is just we are behaving differently than, or we are being industry in general is being asked to behave differently than they have in the past 20 years. And that's something we're actively, working to do in our company, organize ourselves in the way to address that, right? And then build products to address that.
So with that being said, you're saying that as an industry, you're asking to behave differently. Do you feel like all other companies are still behaving in the old ways of like building?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And some of it is, I think larger companies, they recognize this. I mean, they have very high paid, very well connected, very, well-informed people, but, Lockheed Martin has 100,000 engineers, right? And, you can't just take, that's like a giant ship, you can't just come and turn it on a dime and say, oh, now this is what we're going to do, right? I mean, it takes literally years. Even the DoD, actually, that's the talking point that goes with this actually is this next chart. So the DoD, like once this happened, the DoD went and created these rapid capabilities offices, right? So the Army, Air Force, Space Force, Navy, Marines, they all have a rapid capabilities office. And the point of these rapid capabilities offices is to go find technology on this side of this valley and pull it to this side of this valley, right? And that's where I worked. I worked for the Army's Rapid Capabilities Office. I ran the laser stuff for them. And so that even the DoD recognizes they need to behave differently, and they realize the DoD is a giant organization, and you're not going to get everyone to turn on a dime. So they went literally and just stood up new organizations, and then gave them the mission of doing this thing, right? And it's something that will change over time. That all of the DoD should behave that way, but industry has the same problem. Of like a Lockheed Martin or a Raytheon or a Boeing, they just can't react that fast, and organize themselves in this way. And then, like I said, in littler companies, this, you find me a less than 100-person, defense contracting company that goes and reads the National Defense Strategy and uses that to inform how they operate. I mean, there's just not that many of those kinds of companies. That is because it feels like, and it seems like it's so far out of their purview, right? Because in the last 20 years, that's not been something that's been important to them
to, in order to be successful as a small business.
Right. Right. Okay. And the other thing I see is too is being a small business. Like if they were to change their strategy tomorrow, you would be able to shift because you're still small. You have the capability.
They absolutely could. Smaller companies absolutely can. Culturally, I think it ends up being a little bit difficult, for smaller companies because like the type of person you hire to do this is not generally the type of, the type of person that like understands the warfighter is not generally the type of person that you have in a small company, because usually in a small company, everyone's got to know about the widget you're building because everyone's got to be working on the widget. And so it's actually pretty hard for a small, because like this becomes kind of almost, just literally paying for it, right? This becomes like an overhead function, right? I mean, these are people I see, these are the Sheldons, right? I like go to the government customer and I march them out and I'm like, ooh, look at these sexy nerds I got. Look at all the cool stuff they know, and the government's like, ooh, we want the Sheldons, right? Like it's, like that's the thing that's what you could sell, right? You make those little companies make money on their technical expertise. Little companies don't make money on having someone that understands the requirements for what they're building, right? So for us, like these functions they're like overhead functions almost, right? They're, it's like an accountant or, like a business development person almost kind of thing, right? Where, we're just accepting the fact that this is actually a critical part of us being successful as a company, right? Yeah. We need to have these types of people inform the things that we're doing, inform our designs and the direction we're going strategically for the company. And so it oftentimes, I guess, to the point is that it doesn't make sense for little companies to have, or at least they don't believe it makes sense for little companies to have that, because it's not actively helping them sell this idea. They may not necessarily be able to see that. The picture here, and I'm not like, this model is how the DoD does technology transition and how they do business. I didn't invent it. I just observed it, right? I think it's not something that a lot of companies understand or appreciate in the first place. I don't think many defense contractors understand the literal process of, how you actually get from, mouse isn't working, how you actually get from like this side of this little valley with idea to building hardware and what that means, right? And like what is informing the decisions in making it up this, up this ladder. Like there's a whole other conversation that's unrelated to building a website about defense work being like welfare for engineers, because 100% is. I mean, there's just it is. I mean, there's just like like little defense companies are not in. We would be fine. Like I will tell you, we would be just fine. We would make money. I'd have a nice car. Everything would be great, right? If we just lived in this part of the world, and just sat over here. We got super smart people that can do great things and make money over here. So we would be great. I think what's exciting and interesting about our company is the fact that we endeavor to be here and to push this over into there. And I think, and that is truly unique for a company of our size and the type of things we're trying to do.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. I do have two questions. So how do you get the problems from the warfighter? I mean, do you guys hire someone for that? Do you talk to them?
There's a handful of ways. One, they publish that information. You can know it.
Just read it.
Oftentimes, I mean, it's called that. The world is split up into. We're doing like active learning here. So global AORs. Let's see if it'll bring me a picture of that. So combatant commands. Here you go. So the DoD has chopped up the world into a bunch of combatant commands. I don't have a globe here. So these are the war fighters. Africa Command, Central Command, Cyber Command, European Command. So like this is like if we were going to fight the war in Africa, there's a general in charge of that. We're going to fight the war in the Middle East. There's a general in charge of that. This is Europe, General Indo-PACOM. This is like China, Europe, right? North Command's Canada. I don't think we're fighting a war against Canada, but that's all right. Southern Command, South America, probably not fighting a war there, but there too, you know, and then Space Command, you know, and then the strategic commands like the ICBMs. So the DoD has chopped the world up into these areas of responsibility, right? And so these are the warfighting entities in each one of those areas, right? Each one of them creates what's called an integrated priority list. So they do the modeling and simulation, 110-foot bullet problem, right? Whatever, you know, whatever the issue is. And they publish like, here's our capability gaps, right? And those capability gaps then fly, you know, so like, you know, in CENTCOM, right? You know, you've seen the news, bunch of UAVs, right? Big problem, UAVs, right? So that's turning into a capability gap. It already was, but you know, let's just say it just became new. That turns into a capability gap that gets flowed out to all of the services. The way our military works is the Army, Air Force, Navy, Marine, Space Force, right? That service, their job is to arm, train, and equip the war fighters that would go fight the war in this command, right? So it's a different organization. The Army's not over there fighting the war, right? You know, the command, this command, Central Command, is fighting the war in the Middle East. The Army's sending troops and equipment over there for them to do it. So CENTCOM says, we got a problem with the UAVs. CENTCOM goes to the Army, Air Force, Navy, whoever, and says, we need a solution to the UAVs. And then inside of each service, they go to the whatever entity they have, that PEO that I showed you, that program executive office, and says, what do you got to shoot down the UAVs, right? And then that all those things bubble up to the top. So so each one of these commands creates an integrated priority list of the capability gaps that they have that inform the what they need, right? And the what they need is never going to be, we need a laser, right? It's going to be, we need to shoot down the UAV, right? And laser is just a solution to that problem. And you're competing with the bullets and the missile and the orange launcher and whatever else is out there to shoot down UAVs.
Got it. Okay.
So that's so, but the I mean, this is this is becoming more nuanced than I intended. But my experience has been, right, if I go to the CENTCOM people, right, and I say, hey, I got a really great idea. They like look at my resume and they're like, you're a Sheldon. You don't know anything about what we're trying to do, right? And I have no credibility with them, right? What I need, right, when we build this team is I need a person who has that lived experience, who has been at CENTCOM, who has fought in that war and knows what that's like. And I need to train them to say the thing that I'm building to map what I'm building, you know, from nerd speak into how it's going to help them win the war, right? And so that's what this function becomes, right? Is it's a person with the credibility and the legitimate understanding. I was not in the military. I did not deploy to the Middle East and know what it's like to be there and do that, right? And the problems that come, you know, with that and the challenges associated with that, right? And so articulating the products we're building into a context that they understand, right, is really, really important. And translating back too, right? So, you know, the integrated priority list is not as simple as I said. It's not 110-foot bullet problem, right? It's a much more nuanced description of the problem, right? And you need a person that can go and kind of interpret that back to us, right? So this person ends up being like a liaison between the Sheldons and the, you know, the war fighters of, you know, this is what we got. We think it solves your problem. This is how we think it solves your problem. What do you think? And they're like, cool, but what about X, Y, and Z? And that informs our design and how we're doing things over here so that we're constantly tweaking this to get it closer to where they need. Similarly over here, that's a whole different group of people, right? That, you know, if I go talk to them, they're like, you're a Sheldon. You've never built many of a thing. You've only built one of a thing, right? So having someone that has that experience and knowing what they look like, you know, knowing what that looks like and being able to translate back and forth from the new technology into their world, right?
Right.
Is how we build that team. That's what I mean. Like these big companies, they have a bunch of these people, right? But they're not focused on this specific problem. They're generally like, you know, overarching, you know, representing the company to these entities, right? But not specifically for one solution, you know, per se. So yeah, that's how we get the uh, that's how we get the description of the problem to solve. And it's not a one-time thing, right? It's obviously a dialogue that we endeavor to create a dialogue with these communities, right? So that it's like, we got some money, we're building this thing, you know, we think what you want looks like this, and they're like, no, not like that, right? And then we take it back and we go iterate on that and then bring it back, and so that they're involved in the solution from the beginning, right?
Right.
That's more of like a person, like a human nature thing, right? People like stuff they understand.
Right. Okay. Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. So these people, the warfighter and the PO, they're kind of like advisors that you bring in. They talk to you, tell you what it is. That way, when you do put it over that line, it's a lot easier for it to flow. It's like,
Yep, exactly. What you don't, what has happened in the past, you know, what happens in this world a lot, right, is you like spend this money, you get to right around here, and then we call up one of those warfighter people and we're like, hey, check this thing out, right? And they come in and they're like, what are you talking? Like, this is never gonna work, you know, we don't have you know, cranes, you know, at this forward operating base, which is what you require to get it from point A to point B. So this is a non-starter. Like, I mean, literally stuff like that, right? That's super simple, right? And so now it's like, oh crap, well, we spent $60 million on this thing to get to here. So if we redesigned it, you know, we'd have to, you know, go back to here, spend $60 more million, and 5 years later, maybe we have something, you know, something working, right? And so we, you know, it's important to, you know, inject that discussion early on in this kind of design and development phase, so that when we do get to here, it's pretty close to what they want it to look like, right? And then they're like, okay, let's take this out and do something with it.
yeah, totally makes sense. Okay, got it.
I think philosophically, that's the approach. Yeah, I think that's, you know, at a high level, that's kind of what it is.
Okay. Let me. So back to the actual things you guys do, right? Because I understand this. I understand what makes you guys different now, positioning, all that I understand. So you said what you guys do is software and hardware, specifically high energy lasers and space domain awareness. Can you explain what that means now?
Sure. So start with high energy laser. Let me, like, the compelling argument for high energy laser. Shahid 136. 136. Okay, so this is an example of an Iranian drone, right? Actually, this one's kind of expensive. Oh, there we go. Yeah. 10,000. So this is a drone, right? You know, flies in the air. They call it loitering munition, right? So it's got a bomb on it, right? It can fly a really long way, right? So you can let it go, and then it can fly a long way, and then it can go blow something up, right? And the cost, or you can see here, this cost range, right? They've got 193K here, but $10,000, right? I mean, so you're talking about a weapon system that can be extraordinarily damaging, right? You know, so it could hurt a lot of people, or it could hurt a lot of infrastructure, right? It could blow up a, you know, It could blow up an $80 million radar, for example, right?
Right.
And it's really, really inexpensive, right? And they can make, and many of them can be made. So our current solution, right, is that we see this thing and then we fire a missile at it, usually a Patriot missile. Patriot missile. This is a Patriot missile battery. It's got a really sweet radar and then a bunch of little missiles right here, right?
Mhm.
Let's see if they tell you how much they cost.
Jesus.
Well, that's not how much one costs. I don't think it's telling you how much one costs. One costs about, I don't know, oh, there you go, right there. 6 to 10 million for a single missile. So, as you can imagine, they send a $10 to $100,000 drone, and we shoot it down with a $6 to $10 million missile. This is a non-ideal cost curve.
Right.
So I think these are very effective. They work. And we have cheaper missiles, right? So I'm giving you like the most ridiculous example, but I'm pretty sure this has actually happened. But I mean, so, but even still, right? I mean, the cheapest missile we have is probably $200,000-$300,000, right?
Mhm.
And the reality is it takes a lot longer for us to build one missile than it takes for, than it would take to build one drone, right? With some like kind of not that sophisticated explosive on it to be super damaging. So lasers, right? What they represent is if I can shoot that same threat down with a laser, right? Number one is I can shoot many of them down with the same laser. So for buying one laser, I can shoot multiple drones, many drones down, right? And I don't have to reload. I don't have to carry missiles to the, to the front. I don't, all the logistics associated with that. So lasers represent lasers that applied to the UAV, right? The drone threat. They represent putting the area defense on the right side of the cost curve in terms of defending against, a highly proliferated, very low cost threat. So I think that's the most high level compelling argument for it. I think when you get into the, when you get into the like total cost of ownership, it is, so that's how much the missile costs, right? Then you got to put this radar next to it. That radar ain't cheap. I promise you that. So what happens, so the way this thing works, right, is the radar, like from a long way away, senses the drone coming in, right? They track it, and then they let the missile loose and it goes and shoots the thing down, right? But if you think about like, you have to like build all of these missiles, right? If you don't use the missile, it's a bomb. So you got to, you don't just throw it in the trash, right? You got to do something with it, right? You have to go decommission it, right? So like the total cost of ownership is really, really high because you have to like, it's special storage, right? You don't just keep them in the back, in the shed, right? You got to like guard them, because it's a bomb, right? And so having them is is costly, right? Building them's expensive, storing them's expensive. If you don't use them, you have to decommission them. It's very expensive, right? All of like that whole logistics tail associated with the, the total cost of ownership of a battery of Patriots is super high, right? And so what lasers represent is a significant, like, huge reduction in the cost of defending an area, and to include like that entire logistics tail as well.
Okay.
So on the laser side, that's the most compelling argument as the why are we interested in this, and what it is and what it does, right? That's the thing we would replace. For SDA, I'm less familiar with this. This is my what's that thing called, Alex? Wayfinder? Privateer.
The privateer? Yeah.
Yeah, here it is. So for SDA, so the number of things in space has
increased like exponentially in the last like whatever 10 years or something like that. And my internet connection might be kind of slow when this thing pops up. And what we've found, or I think what they found is, you know, like Elon Musk has put like, you know, literally thousands of Starlink satellites in space, right?
Yeah.
And then there's a bunch of space junk, and then there's a bunch of stuff we put in space, right? So this is pretty sure this is true. Let me make sure so everything, every little dot here is something that someone has like identified in space. Everything that is green is something that they have identified and they know what it is. Like all of these things really close, like most of these are Starlinks. Like if you click on it, any little one of them, it's probably a Starlink. Let me click on it. It's not working. Everything that's pink is something in space and we don't know what it is. Could be space junk, could be spy satellite, could be an alien, we don't know. Like, so, you know, so like someone has made like an observation, there's something there, right? We believe there's something there, but we haven't like confirmed what it is, friend, foe, space junk, whatever. And so the problem we, like, I think there's like a multifaceted problem here, and I probably won't articulate it well. I know less about this, right? But the problem is like, you know, I think they're generally worried that if we put something in space, we don't want that thing running into our thing.
Right.
We spend a lot of money to get something in space. And number two, just like, you know, is this a spy satellite? Is this something that, you know, is friend, is it foe or whatever, right? And there's literally, there are not enough sensors, right? And I use sensor kind of broadly. It could be a telescope, it could be a radar. I mean, there's a bunch of different things. There's not enough sensors on the ground and in space to like keep custody of, track, you know, identify. A lot of these things in space can move, right? So like as a scientist, I did not appreciate this as a problem. I thought we had the whole like, hidden figures. Like we could do like the thing went in space and we had the calculators calculate where it was and there it is. Apparently that's not true. You know, like, so if we put a new thing in space, like if we put a new thing, like, you know, out here is called geosynchronous orbit, this like little ring right here, like that's like the direct TV, you know, kind of thing, also spy satellite. But you know, if we put something new there, like I guess it takes us like 3 weeks to determine like its orbit, and you know, like to, you know, because we're just sitting here, like I'm sitting here in Albuquerque, right? That thing, you know, the geo ones stay in one place, but these other things, that thing is like, you know, moving in some orbit. It takes an inordinately long amount of time for us to like establish this is what it is, this is where it is, and this is where it's going to be tomorrow, kind of thing, right? And things can maneuver, which change that, right? And so there's a motivation to increase our sensing ability, right, in space. And you know, one aspect of that is just like mini little telescopes on the ground to look at things. I think it's a big problem that they're trying to solve in a bunch of different ways. But yeah, there's a bunch of things in space, and we don't know what all those things are.
So the goal is just to identify what they are. Simply.
Yeah, identify it. I think, I don't know, maybe Alex can say that better than me. I think identify, track, be able to predict where they are.
Yeah, and also their intent. You know.
Yeah, intent. Yeah. Are they good guys, bad guys, space junk, whatever it is.
Got it. Okay.
This one's like green all the way out here. Well, I can't, for some reason it's like running too slow. Well, let me click on it, but it's kind of a cool website. These guys, we're kind of friends with them, and they do this.
So they just plot it and just tell you.
So what they do is there's a bunch of little companies. Well, I don't know if there's a bunch. There's a bunch of companies that like have a bunch of telescopes, and then they like find stuff and track it, and then they sell the data to either these guys or the DoD or whoever.
Okay, got
So
it.
the software stuff, like Alex does the software stuff for our biggest effort in this, right? And a lot of it is like, you know, because like these things are like flying over your head fast, right? So, like these things that are super close are only like in your horizon for 90 seconds or something like that. And so you need to have some software that says, hey, this thing's coming. You should use this asset in this location to track it, or, oh, it's cloudy, so you're not going to be able to see it. So don't use that one. Let's see if we can, wait till we get over here and we can see it or something like that. But like the tasking of like a global sensor network, right? And how to coordinate all of those activities. Because clearly there's like too many things to measure at once, right? I mean, you're not going to have like, everything measured in one single time, but you got to figure out like the things you care the most about, and then like be able to very efficiently track those things.
Got
And
it.
it apparently is like a very difficult problem to solve.
So within these two things, the high energy lasers and the space domain, you do both the hardware and the software in those two areas.
Yes. Yeah.
Got it.
The software stuff on the laser side is less sophisticated, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they're like the software stuff for the space is because it's like very, it's a big, a very like, challenging problem where there's many things here. They're a long way away from you. They make, it's, like this ring, right? I mean, this is, what is that, like 36,000 kilometers away from Earth, like from the ground, right? I mean, so like you're trying to find a thing that's the size of a bus, 36,000 kilometers away from where you are, right? And under the right conditions, and and be able to like efficiently like task your set of sensors. So like even figuring out like where the best place to like put sensors on the planet to give you the best like chance of observing these things is a challenge, right? Whereas the lasers, like the drone's like 2 kilometers away from you, it's right there. Like the software's a lot easier. Like we're here, bad guys are over there, shoot the thing, so but yes, we do the software, it's just a lot less sophisticated.
Right. Okay. Got it. Okay. I don't have any other questions. Is there anything else that you want to share with the kickoff? Because I feel like this is a lot for me to marinate. I'm gonna have to.
Oh yeah, I gave you
the video a couple of times.
Yeah, I gave you the full stump speech there, so we can go over it again. And I think I don't know how you like. I don't know what the next step for you is. I mean, I can work on the words, and like I said, I am like this, back to our discussion, like the messaging piece, right? The like this evolution, right? I've got like that narrative I have pretty solidly in my head, right? I think it's just translating that into something that is, and I gave you a level of fidelity there that is probably not, like we're clearly not going to put this like level of detail on a website, because I don't think it's really I think it's not really palatable for folks just looking at a website. In my mind, we hit, at least in my head, we kind of hit these like, but the jargon, right? The buzzwords, mission focused teams, rapid innovation, like these types of things, and they paint the broader picture in people's heads, right?
Right. For the DoD part. I think right now what I would do is, if you can, well, first off, send me the recording for this. I'm going to look through my notes and watch it again. And I think the next step would be, I'm going to write down some more questions as far as like the branding and the messaging goes. I think where the messaging would come in is mostly for your proposals to the DoD and explaining to them what makes you different, so that they understand it better and they can see clearly that you connect these pieces. Because that's the strongest piece. Also, even talking about your background, because I think that your background is what also bridges the connection between understanding what's happening with you know, the nerds versus what's happening with the actual warfighters. I think that that's also a big thing to highlight. So let's do this. I'm gonna look it over. I'm gonna write down some more questions after I look it over. And if you can send me the glossary or like the buzzwords, that way I can also take a look at that. And we can schedule the next meeting in about a week, if that's okay. I can get with Isla to get the dates together and everything, and we'll go from there. Because I know when I watch this again, I'm probably gonna Google some things and kind of dive a little deeper myself. So I'll let you know if the next meeting where I'm at with the questions, if I want to start diving already into like the messaging, or if I have more questions to dive into what you guys do.
Sure. Probably take me a little bit to turn on the jargon. That might be a working document too, but I'll get the big ones out.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, just overall, we don't, nothing's set in stone at all yet, so we might have to add in things. But yeah, okay. This was a lot, but it's super interesting. So thank you so much. Also, you said that you worked at those places. Are you a scientist?
Yeah, by training, yeah, a PhD in electrical engineering. So yeah, I built the core of the laser technology we have. I built like some of the early versions of those things. And then yeah, so that's my background. My background is technical.
Are you a Sheldon?
No, I'm not. No,
Okay.
I'm more like what's the other guy who wasn't as smart as Sheldon but still a scientist? I'm like that guy. The guy that was on Roseanne. I can't remember his name. Who dated Penny? I'm that guy.
No one that's okay.
Yeah. Like I mean, I'm like, I'm all right, but I'm not that smart. We got the Sheldons in our company, but not as weird. We don't have any super weird people.
I like Sheldon, even though he was a little weird. All right. Okay, sounds good. So Isla, I will definitely email you, and so we can schedule the next meeting and get everyone's calendar together. And then let me know when you have the video ready so we can start reviewing that too.
Okay, sounds good. I captured some notes in the chat for you, but I'm not sure if that actually captures within the video. So we'll see. But then, Craig, I captured some of your jargon, so I can pull that into like, do you want a Google Doc to start all working in the same thing?
Yeah, that's perfect. I think when you
Okay.
when you download the video, it should give you a like a chat.
I'm not
like
sure if it captures it.
I know Zoom.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
I know.
for
Yeah,
download,
Zoom.
but-
I'll copy it just in case. Some of it doesn't matter, but some of it might be helpful for you. And I'll drop that into a Google, share that with everyone. We'll set the next date, and then I'll send you. I think, Craig, you're gonna phone ring. I think, Craig, you'll get we'll see what happens if the recording drops into the chat or if you're going to get an email. I'm not sure which one. I don't know if anyone knows that.
Before hopping on.
So do I have to figure out how to get the recording, or is it going to be someplace?
I kind of feel like it'll drop into the meeting chat because I've seen when other chats are happening and they share information, I get a copy of it because I'm within that chat. So I think it will, but if it doesn't, Craig, hopefully you see something on your side. Or if you want to stop now, see what happens. Stop the recording.
Stop the recording.
Yeah, if not,